Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm your host, Brian Coddington, my fellow co-host and filmmaker, John Woolscroft.
You know, some people call me the man of 1,000 smells.
I don't think no one wants to be called the man of 1,000 smells. That's kind of gross. You probably should take a shower or get new deodorant.
Slow down, Mr. Scientist. What's a shower?
A shower, bathing. On this very special episode, we're still kind of in spooky season. I don't know when this episode's going to come out. My guess is probably during spooky season. We haven't done an expose on a filmmaker or film person in quite a while. And our special guest with us today is a super fan of a certain film person that is not living, but is quite literally one of the fathers of, I really believe, the fathers of special effects makeup and one of the fathers of modern horror in cinema. And I don't think he gets nearly enough credit as some other people out there. But we're going to be talking about Lon Chaney Sr., not Jr., but Sr. And we've got our friend of the show, and constant collaborator now, because she's been back here a couple times, Anastasia Elfman. Welcome to the podcast again, Anastasia.
Hello, it's me.
It's you again. And this was one that peeked behind the scenes, folks. So Anastasia went asked us like, "Oh, I want to come back on the show." And we're like, "Great." And she had pitched doing a Lon Chaney episode. So this honestly was all Anastasia's thought up, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm down for this." Because we've talked about filmmakers that are still living. We've talked about ones that maybe even died. Like I think we did Joel Schumacher at one point. And I think that was right after he had passed away. So, I mean, we've done with this sort of thing where we've focused on a filmmaker, but Lon Chaney is a man who, film people will know, but I don't know if the public has the same appreciation as us film people do. Like, I've always had appreciation for him because I've done special effects makeup myself. And any person who's done special effects makeup, you've got on your Mount Rushmore people like Tom Savini, Dick Smith, and at the very tippity top is Lon Chaney Sr. Wouldn't you all agree?
Oh yeah, I think a lot of more people know his son.
They know his son,
now, and it's because we're talking the beginnings of film as compared to when Lon Chaney Jr. came in. We're talking the Universal monster era. Those are a lot more of those films are preserved than the early stages of films that we saw in a movie like Babylon. But just because obviously Anastasia, I think, since you pitched this episode, your take is a little more important. That's why I wanted to jump in and go first here, and we'll hear from you. Of all ways that I learned about Lon Chaney was I was an Animaniacs fan growing up. And in the opening song, the very end of it goes, Animani, totally insane. And then every episode had a different thing that rhymed there, like Pinky and the Brainy. But I remember Wacko dressed as the Hunchback of Notre Dame saying, "Where's Lon Chaney?" And then it goes to Animania. And I went to my dad and I'm like, "Dad, who's Lon Chaney?" And that's when I kind of got introduced to Lon Chaney and everything about him. So thanks, Animaniacs.
Yay.
Well, Anastasia, what about you? How do you kind of agree that like on the Mount Rushmore of horror and especially special effects makeup is Lon Chaney like right at the tippity top?
For me personally, definitely. He's, besides my husband, he's like my number one guy. in all ways, he is, like what you were saying, the reason why we have horror like we know it. He was very inspired by like German, the expressionism and everything, and brought that. He's like one of the first in America to bring that to the audience. And first of all, thank you for giving me this wonderful platform and listening to my insanity and my insane pitches. I've pitched a lot of films to you guys too.
we welcome all insanity here. And like as a special effects person who's done that work, and in my younger years was like very much like I did my thesis film partially around the idea of special effects makeup. So like I researched Chaney and a bunch of the others, and when you told me this pitch, I'm like, yeah, that's yes.
If you had come on and been like, let's talk about Scott Baio post Happy Days, I'd have been like, I don't know about this, Annie.
Yeah, I'd be like, I don't know if we can't swing that around for October, but Lon Chaney, absolutely.
I don't know if you can say no to this face, but sure. I'm sure we probably would have been talking about that too. No, I'm just joking. No, I mean, the thing is like when you do effects makeup, it's kind of you get into the backstory of everything, right? Because and especially when you're doing stuff behind the scenes, you're a costumer, you're doing set design. It's like you're interested in the history of what, like the medium and the method that you're working in. And it's like, I would say, especially because I do effects makeup professionally as well. And I grew up doing that too. I mean, I was definitely exposed to learning about that, and everybody in the different shops that I worked in, they're always talking about the masters and like Lon Chaney Sr. I mean, I'm so biased, but I don't know how you can get better. I mean, and that alone would have been enough to like secure his like legendary status. But this fucking guy, like, he's got to be amazing at acting and directing and use of shadows, like all kinds of crazy stuff. He did his costuming, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself, but all of these things, there were not unions for makeup. There were like actors were literally doing it themselves. Like the studios would send like guidelines of like what kind of like shadows worked best because of the black and white film. And so like the actors could follow along, but it's not necessarily that anybody was good at what they were doing. Like some people can do makeup and then some people can do makeup. You know what I mean? So
well, I think what's interesting about Chaney is that, yes, a lot of the actors that came from that period, we're talking like the early days of cinema here, they came from vaudeville. Like that is where they came. Chaney came from vaudeville.
Yes.
So, when you're in vaudeville, you have to do everything, right? Like you might be acting, but then you're also like doing like all of the stuff behind the scenes of it too. And I think it's also a thing where with vaudeville, you had to do quick turnaround of stuff, right? Like you didn't have preparation time. So I think what separates Chaney out from every other actor who maybe had to do their own makeup is that Chaney was doing things with makeup that normally, they were quick turnaround time things, but they were also highly detailed and very like grotesque in certain ways. And like that sort of style of makeup, which isn't just beauty makeup, right? That takes time, and that takes understanding of anatomy, understanding of how things work, and manipulating your face and your body in ways that are painful, right? And that's, I think, what separated him out from everybody else was that, yeah, someone else from vaudeville might be able to put on cake makeup and get away with it, no problem. But where Chaney did this was he was actively transforming his facial structure at times.
Well, in a lot of the early days of makeup in film, before Lon Chaney he's a bad guy, put a fake beard on him or put a hat on him. That was it, and he came from this vaudeville life, which I believe he was blackballed from vaudeville, right? That's why he even got in the movie picture business. Yeah. But he went, there's so much more we can do, because when you do theater, there's a lot of differences. Like you need to talk very loud for the back row. And it's like in a film, it's like, no, you're wearing a microphone. You're okay. You don't need to talk that loud. But like you need to put on a lot more makeup to work to the back row, where they think, oh, well, no, we got a camera now. We'll just have the person sneer. That's all we'll need to do. So yeah, he brought all that vaudeville expertise, and let's face it, the guy is pretty much a genius in and of his own right. Even if there was a lot of other makeup artists, he would have just come in and been like, no, I'm taking over,
Well, the thing, John, is there really weren't makeup artists.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Yeah. He was literally creating that job title in a way, because the studios were looking at him as a sort of makeup artist, and he literally wrote the book on what could be achieved in like practical makeup effects, but but yeah, you, John, you cover a lot of really interesting topics. I mean, you were talking about how stage performers have to like project and stuff, and then that would be the opposite for the pre-code horror because there were silence, and so a lot of the projection was internalized and in mannerisms that the performers had to make sure a lens could capture, if that makes sense, you know, like where you're being very big and boisterous for a theater and for a live audience, you have to be able to tone that down and get very intimate, like with the camera, you know what I mean? And so that was like something that not all actors were able to switch, along with when we get to the talkies, a lot of those silent stars couldn't switch that because their voices didn't match their looks. You know what I mean? And a lot of them didn't like the idea of talkies anyways, because they wanted their physical performances to do the talking, if that makes sense. And Lon, along with like his like almost constant collaborator, Todd Browning, whom I love, they were both pretty against talkies. And if memory is serving correctly, Lon had a contract, and it was like just at the start of talkies, and a studio wanted him to do lines in his film, and he was like looking at the contract and he was like, that's not specified, and so he did the film silent. Which is so great. I love like, you know, how like, I don't know, he's a little crazy, but I love him.
well, you brought up something interesting, and I mean, both you, Anastasia, and John, you brought up 2 points that I really want to focus on. Is, you know, one, the fact that he was a vaudeville star and did kind of, you know, emote in a way that was a little bit more unusual than other vaudeville stars. And then also the fact that his vaudeville career was ended very prematurely. Anastasia, as our resident Lon Chaney expert, do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, his background with his parents being deaf, and then also a little bit about kind of how he might have, you know, how he ended up getting blackballed?
Well, I mean, there's so much in his early life and history, and also there's not, if that makes sense, because he was famous for not giving interviews, and so a lot of this has been, you know, gathered up from different historic events and a lot of research and things like that. So it's hard to have like a super definite, but I talked to his great grandson a bit, Ron Chaney, and I've heard a lot of his interviews and stuff. And it, you know, it talks about, you know, so he was the son of, his parents were both deaf mutes. And so he ended up not being, he was nonverbal for the first like 4 years of his life. And so there's like no need for him to learn to speak or anything like that, because the home life was, you know, just doing sign language and things like that. And then as he grew older, his mother got sick, and so she was bedridden, and so Lon would you know, kind of like do pantomiming and act out the kind of like the day's events in town, because his father was like the head barber in town, and they Lon grew up in like Colorado, which you guys know, right? Yeah. And so he really kind of like cultivated his craft for pantomiming, just like performing for his mother. And they were all very, very close. And also because of like her sickness, he had to like be very responsible for his younger siblings and had to like get a job and things like that. Like, so he was very responsible and had like a very huge, strong work ethic, you know? And so, I mean, that just lays the whole foundation for who he is as a performer as well, you know, knowing that kind of history. Do you want to know anything else about like very early? I don't know. Like, no, do I dig more, or do you want me to keep on going?
We can. I mean, what I found from that, like I also looked at this too, and I was like, the effect of having to communicate with your body and your facial expressions, literally on and off camera, that has to affect your ability to communicate characters when you're being paid professionally. So like, I think that is a leg up that he had going in, and why he was able to kind of take these characters that were, you know, either like monsters, or they were gangsters, or they were, you know, deformed people, and be able to bring pathos to them, is because the man had to do that all his life, right? Yes, it wasn't deaf mute, but he had to talk to his parents in a way that was, you know, using physicality and using, you know, nonverbal to get the message across, right? And that's for me, like, I see that's a big thing about this kid, this actor.
Well, one thing I don't want to jump too far ahead in his career, but like, is that he was not the first. I'm sure there were a bunch, but he is one of the first character actors. Like,
yes.
You know, where I'm gonna hide under all this makeup, I'm gonna walk with a hump or a limp, and, you know, play all kinds of different, like, you know, people that aren't normally represented in film.
But not even that. I mean, he was basically, you know, you said character actor. I mean, he was not known as like, oh, that's Lon Chaney. It's, oh, that's the Phantom, or, oh, that's the Hunchback. And it was like, he was just kind of like the way that we see, you know, actors now will like watch a movie and be like, oh, that person, I've seen them before in this thing, but I might not know necessarily their name. You know, I think that's kind of what you're meaning there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was like film was just getting going. So he had the luxury of kind of like tapping in the beginning. And so everything that they were creating was revolutionary. You know what I mean? Like, it was all new. I mean, I think it's important to mention that like Lon Chaney Sr. has like that he believes his characters could have like a redemption, even the most evil ones, you know, and that was kind of his goal in picking, because he definitely, especially near the end, because in the beginning it was like he had this huge motivation to break into the world of, you know, cinema. And so he was taking every single project that was coming his way, and he was like a background actor. I mean, he started doing, I think it was like sets and different things like that. But he was like moving his way up very, very fast. And people were starting to notice him. And so it was kind of like hard to like really pinpoint his first film, like where he's first noticed, because he was doing a lot of the background acting and transforming himself. And that's kind of like also how he got into like in front of the camera, was because he would come to work with doing the different makeups on himself just randomly. And so like people were like, do you want to be an actor? Like, why are you wearing these false teeth, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's good. I think it leads into kind of talking about the man's makeup strategy. And I think it's important to bring up because, like, you know, when we're talking about special effects makeup nowadays, we know, like, okay, well, one, most of that special effects makeup isn't done practically. You know, it's done with CGI, right? Or it's done with kind of a mishmash of where you might have some elements that are practical, but then there's also painted green screen or whatever to kind of add the CG elements. What people don't get is that Chaney quite literally was doing what are referred to as build-ups. And what build-ups are literally taking cotton and collodion and building up structures on his face. And, you know, then on top of that, adding, you know, elements to his face that honestly were painful. Like, the man put egg whites in his eyes. He put glass eyes, like actual glass eye, like lenses that were thick in his eye to get the effect. Things that were extremely painful, using glues that probably were toxic at the time. You know,
everything was toxic. Yeah.
Well, and now probably, I'm guessing they're probably still toxic.
Probably still toxic.
Here's your lead paint, Mr. Chaney.
But like collodion scars you. You know, it can scar you if you get it on your skin and you don't use it properly. But he's putting that on his face, and this is something that had to be done every single day he was on set in that character. And, you know, I didn't realize this at the time because I did a little research on this. So I realized that he actually used a wax life cast of his face to build up and test these things, which I find so fascinating.
Yes, because I remember somebody was mentioning that he had a quick turnaround and things like that, and I was going to interject with my vast Chaney knowledge.
Sorry.
And mention that actually he did a huge amount of prep, like 3 months, like massive amounts of prep to really fine tune and to work at home. And I don't want to like cut you off if you're still talking
No,
about.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so like some fun Phantom, like tidbits. It's like he wanted to keep. You guys probably already know this, but he wanted to keep his Phantom makeup a secret, and so he would apply it at home, and then he would put literally like a fake human mask on, drive himself to set so that the paparazzi would not see him, and then go walk into his trailer and take it off.
I did not know this.
Yeah. Like, he's insane, and I love it. Because, like, that dedication to craft, are you kidding me? Thank you. No, but it's like, because, like, think about, like, who's going to be out in front of, like, the studio in, like, 1924, I guess, when they were filming it, you know? Like, I don't know who he was expecting to see, but they really, I guess, and he thought that they really wanted to like, you know, capture it. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
at the paparazzi with their exploding bulb cameras, you know.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. Like at the time he did the Phantom, he was at the height of his popularity. Like that was right when people already knew him as the Man of 1,000 Faces. He had done like he had done the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He'd done the Penalty, done Miracle Man. So I mean, he had already done all these movies, and those are, by the way, the ones that we have some footage of. He did more that are lost films.
He did hundreds of films, which is insane.
Films,
yeah,
and they're all lost, which is
a majority
in itself.
Yeah, lost and also not accounted for because it's like, you know, like the records, it's nuts.
Well, a lot of early cinema, like if you ever watch Metropolis, just know that is not the original score of the film, because that was just lost. So it's always a new score for Metropolis, like, you know, because that's one of the most famous, you know, early films in cinema history. Yeah, there's no audio for that. So even the ones that are beloved, a lot of times things get lost.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's radical how like how did we lose what was it? London After Midnight? Like how do you lose an entire film? Like whose fucking job was that? Because you failed.
A lot of early film, I think, with the exceptions of a few masters, like I think it was just a huge party. And I don't think that anybody was taking it seriously. You know, jump ahead many, many years to some of the original Doctor Who's, and they're just completely lost. And the people would say, well, yeah, we aired it and then we just erased the tapes so we could use them again. You know,
oh my God,
if you look at through history, like first it's like, oh, somebody's does play acting, how unseemly. But then that gets a little normalized and it's, oh, they do vaudeville, how unseemly. And then event that gets normalized, and they do film, how unseemly. And then then TV and you know, the internet and so on and so forth. Though it's always the new version is, oh, how beneath us, you know, is this?
Well, I think it's honestly kind of the same way that you know when we first had phones that had cameras on them, right? Like you didn't keep every single video you created with the camera on your phone, right? You didn't keep every single picture. Nowadays we have cloud storage, so it's like everything's being kept no matter what, right? But like back then, if you like, oh, well, I have only so many megabytes left on my phone, I'm going to clear some space. I think that's kind of the mentality back then was, you know, I'm going to put the movie out there. Yeah, I'll get some people. I don't care if people see it again, and I'll just get rid of it to make space for new reels that I'm making, right? And I think it wasn't until like you get to, I hate to say it, the sound era, where now it's like, we have to keep these things. Like there is now maturity in the technology of it, that it's not just like, well, it's one and done, throw it out, you know, that we have to keep these things because of how much time and energy went into them.
Well, how often do you hear that? Like, oh, where did this film come from? Oh, we just found it in some warehouse covered in dust and rat turds. Yeah, so we restored it, you know? Yeah.
Nosferatu was found hidden because someone was like, I don't want this destroyed. It's a beautiful piece of art.
Yeah.
Was that the official press release, John? Dust and rat turds?
Dust and rat turds.
Yeah.
Officially.
No one ever says that. That's the part that's hidden behind it. Someone who's found it's like, oh, yeah.
Well, I broke into this warehouse looking for drugs, and then I found this 1923 movie covered in dust and rat turds.
That's what's going to happen when they eventually do find London after midnight. Yeah. It's going to be covered in dust and rat dirt.
And then Chad's going to be like, "See, I told you."
See, I told you.
He's going to be so vindicated.
Every lost film's found with dust and rat dirt.
No, but I think wasn't it one of Todd Browning's films, like somewhat recently found, The Mystic? They thought that it was lost, and it was just in France, categorized under some other title, and so they randomly found it, and then it was just like released in a nice, beautiful. Oh, here it is. I brought it down.
Nice. So
a nice little box set. I love physical media, and this one is so good. Here. If you don't have it, it has Freaks, The Mystic, and
Gobble.
We Accept You, One of Us. Yeah, I'm
cool.
I know.
They did the
I know
same
things.
thing. They did the same thing with George Romero. Like they had his movie, the Amusement Park. Yeah. And what was cool about that was one of my professors was someone who was involved. He was one of Romero's collaborators, and he was involved in the finding of that footage.
Oh my god, amazing!
It's the same sort of thing. Like he made that movie. It was an industrial film. He was just like, no one's gonna want to see this, and it became the lost Romero film that eventually was discovered. Not with dust and rat turds, John, but I'm just.
But maybe. Who's to say?
Oh, it's here in Pittsburgh. It was Dustin Pierogi crumbs.
That's true. Dustin Pierogi crumbs were here. Moving on from that, I just want to ask you guys, what is your favorite Lon Chaney character? Like out of his repertoire of characters, which one's your favorite?
You never forget your first.
Okay.
So when I wanted to learn about Lon Chaney, my independent video rental store, Papa Rops in Edinburgh, had the Phantom of the Opera. They had a silent film section, and so that was my introduction to him. So I think that that's always going to hold a place in my heart for that reason.
Anastasia, what about you?
How can you even ask me a question like that? That's so rude.
Like, you want me to pick my favorite kid? Is that it?
You want me to Sophie's choice it right here and now?
Okay, can you give me like a top three? Can you give me like top three?
I mean, I love our sad boy Eric Phantom. Yeah. I love Echo from the Unholy Three, and I love the Unknown. I'm obsessed with everything he does, though, so it's not really fair. But those performances are really, really important to me, and I find new things and new winks, and I mean he's such a diverse actor and so unique. But yeah, I'm gonna just keep on gushing.
That's good. I personally, I'm also an Eric fan, but I also am a Quasimodo fan too. And it's mostly just because with Quasimodo, he had to wear a 40 or 50 pound hump on his back, and that on top of the face stuff, on top of all of that, and still be able to emote this sadness of this character, right? And I think that's what kills me about that. I wish, and I love Bela Lugosi, but I wish that there was maybe test footage or something of Lon Chaney as Dracula, because I know he would have killed it as that character and added something entirely different. Not a lot of people know this, but Lon Chaney was the first one in mind when Todd Browning was looking at making Dracula. He was the first person he thought of, but unfortunately he passed away before it could be made.
Brian,
I knew that.
You knew that. I know you knew that.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
I did not. And Brian, let me ask you, do you think it would be closer to a Nosferatu than more of the dashing, Bela Lugosi we got if it had been Lon Chaney?
Well, here's the thing. I think that if Lon Chaney was Dracula, you would have had, and again, I love Bela Lugosi, but I think you would have had a Dracula that was more in line with, say, the kind of emoting vampire that you get with like Gary Oldman. Because like if you look at Lon Chaney, every one of his characters, Anastasia, you point this out, has kind of a sadness to them and has kind of an emotive to them. And I think that I can't see Lon Chaney being like, I'm just gonna be a monster from Transylvania. I can't see him doing that. I think he would have added some pathos to his performance that would have made us sympathetic to him on some level. And I think he would have probably told Todd Browning, like, this can't just be the play. This has to be this. What's his character doing? And why are they doing it? And what's their emotional reason? I think Bela Lugosi did a fantastic job. He set the mold, right, for Dracula. But I mean, if you look at his performance, it is just kind of, not the deepest. When you compare it to other Draculas, it's not the deepest.
Yeah. I mean, wasn't Lugosi like kind of touring with the stage play, and so he was so into it, and so not to say it was like robotic or anything, but he knew where he could like push things, and he just knew the character so well. But also, I mean, exactly, he was Lon Chaney Sr. was definitely being courted to play Dracula, and I think wasn't that kind of a ripoff?
Nosferatu was a
legal workaround.
It was a legal workaround.
Okay, so
by F.W. Murnau.
I get it.
Yeah, and Todd Browning's Dracula would have been the first authorized version, even though it doesn't even play in line with the book, for fuck's sake. Like, I mean, it's the play. That's what it is.
I mean, I definitely agree with that Lon would have approached the work and the the script, the story, the acting, and the character design in a more nuanced way. And I think that we would have been seeing, like how he played dual characters a lot. We might have seen another dual character, and he might have even split up the Dracula. Like maybe there would be a version where he's very like gorgeous, and then maybe there's a hideous side to him or something like that. But I do think that we would have gotten a more visceral, a deeper monster in it, because that's kind of like what he would want to play, right? Just like knowing his history of like exaggerating with like his physical features and with Eric and things like that. Like I feel like this would be too much of a tease to him not to like dive in like that, Right.
I do think though that, and this is to Lugosi's credit, I think that the sex appeal would have gone down with Chaney. I think I know.
Welcome to the doghouse, fella.
Yeah. Listen.
Here's
why I say that.
Have you seen this man?
I know.
Him. Oh my god.
Okay. Well, I guess the reason why I say that is because Lugosi's Dracula brought the sex appeal in the early 30s.
Okay.
And Lon Chaney was older at the time. He was. I'm just saying.
Look, some people.
Do we have to? Are we gonna?
Are we not friends now?
Brian, are we fighting right now?
No.
I have to fight?
Oh, I don't.
Annie, I would say that some people, regardless of the good looking, like some people fuck, and like Bella fucks. Like you look at me, he fucks.
Okay. Yeah. That man fucks, and he fucks like two vampire brides at a time. Okay.
I don't know. Have you seen The Penalty?
Yeah.
Like, have you never seen him angry and pulling hair and whipping women? Like, excuse me? Maybe you just haven't been exposed to the right Lon Chaney Sr.
I guess I have not been exposed to the right Lon Chaney Sr. But
have you seen how romantic he was as our poor Eric in the shadows? And he's literally murdering people for this good-for-nothing Christine. Like, fuck her. Like, a man literally, like, risking his life to make sure that she's the star of the opera. No, excuse me. I'll take over.
Fair enough. I stand corrected.
I'm sorry. You can have your opinion. It's wrong, but you can have it.
I guess I just mean like when you look at Dracula and you look at what Bela Lugosi brought to it, he brought the Eastern European, bona fides to it. He brought I'm sorry, Anastasia, he did bring the sex appeal to it, to at least the 30s at a time when they were like, yeah, we never seen that before. So I'm just saying.
I don't know. Pre-code
and a
4.
vampire. I'm
Pre-code was pretty
movie.
racy.
You're right.
It was pretty racy. And that's why we got the code, because they were sexing it up, drugging it up, all kinds of stuff wild stuff was happening.
There were boobs everywhere.
There were boobs everywhere. Not really.
No, check out the pre-code. There are boobs. Tons of boobs.
There are boobs.
There's a lot of stuff happening. Oh man, tangents are fun. No, I'm kidding. It's fine. You're right. Lugosi's great. But I'll have you with that in mind, rewatch Phantom. See how sexy he is twirling around in his mask and in his cape, and then watch The Penalty. Watch him literally like rip the hair off of these women. Yeah.
I have to watch that. Truth be told, I've never seen The Penalty, so that's one I have to find and I have to watch. Yeah.
Well, now you have to go in the penalty box.
I'm in the penalty box.
That's what happens. We can cut this part out. Nobody can know. Nobody can know.
I'm keeping this shit in. I'm keeping all this shit in. I'm keeping it all in.
Ryan owns his shame, but no,
I own my shame. Here's the thing. Someone in the comments is going to be like, Brian, you fucked up. So I'm gonna leave it in there. Well,
no, I think to each their own. Like everybody thinks X, Y, and Z is sexy, and I like warrant like that is totally fine. I just happen to really think Lon Chaney Sr. is very sexy.
Well, you are wearing a Lon Chaney Sr. shirt, so I mean it's okay. It's cool.
Yeah,
it's cool. Plus, we all know that Christopher Lee is the superior Dracula.
And there you go. Uh-oh. We're all going to get banned now for one reason or another.
Granted, there's like 900 Dracula movies, so like someone's going to be pissed off no matter what.
But there's only a couple important ones. We all know
That's
this.
True.
Blackula's the best one. I love Blackula.
Not Scream, Blackula Scream. You like the original?
Oh,
Blackula?
Yeah, the OG, son. But,
the OG.
But Brian, just to kind of go back to what you said about him wearing that like 50-pound hump, I think about 10 minutes ago. Like I know that a lot of that with Lon Chaney, that was his choice a lot of the time. But it is just amazing how much just actors were cattle back then. Hey, are you sure we should put this on the face? It might burn. Yeah, they're just actors. Hey, he's not walking enough with a limp. Break a couple of his toes, would you? And it actually, the way that actors were treated like cattle is kind of, I don't mean to jump too far ahead, is how he died, So
how so, John? You want to illuminate us?
Well, the God only knows the poison that they were using for fake snow, and a movie he was in got into his lungs, and he got pneumonia and never recovered. Because again, they probably did not pay attention to anything that they were using on whether it was hazardous for human beings. I think the original Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz, they use like lead paint on his face.
And
he's like, oh, he got horrifically sick. Yeah, so it was just a complete and total anarchy, like madhouse back in the day.
And now we have unions, so
Louis B. Mayer is spinning in his grave.
Well, what was funny was like we were recently at the Erie Horror Fest and we were driving back and somehow when we're driving back, we have these conversations. And one of the conversations that we had was about the award shows that exist. And Anastasia, do you know why we have award shows? Why they were invented?
Why don't you tell me?
Okay, so they were invented to bust unions.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I think, what was it, John? You said Louis B. Mayer was one of the ones who's like, yeah, if we make an award show that will celebrate, certain departments and actors, that will separate them out from, say, the other actors and other crew people who maybe want to start a union.
Well, it's, the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Like anything back in the day that was horrible in Hollywood, it's like how many degrees away from Louis B. Mayer was it? You know.
Yeah, but no, award shows are a union busting tactic, which is I blows my mind.
Wild.
Absolutely
Wild. Makes sense, but wild.
It's just wild. Well, you know, John, you mentioned about the hump and everything.
What hump?
There's some other things that he did to his body that in researching, I'm like, this is insane. So like, to make himself appear like he didn't have legs, this man actually put his legs into harnesses that bent his whole leg back, which I got nothing on that. Like, that's
Are you talking
why?
about his
Yeah.
performance and the penalty?
Yes, the penalty.
Oh,
The penalty
yeah.
that you're holding up. Yes.
This one right here. How odd.
For all of our people that only listen to the show, you're missing great
You're
footage.
missing all of the props that Anastasia. We didn't know Anastasia was going to come in with props with us. You're just like, I'm going to come in and show you this movie, and I'm going to show you this movie.
I literally had to look at my bookcases and be like, what don't I bring down? As like I'm walking down the stairs into my husband's office, like with like 5 books and like 10 DVDs.
It's like it's Christmas morning. I'm bringing down the satchel full of Lon Chaney stuff.
I almost brought down the VHS tapes.
Oh,
it's so bad. It's so bad.
That's nothing wrong with that. I love physical media myself. I don't have nearly as extensive as a collection, but you got a pretty good one there. And I do have a couple VHS tapes, even though I don't have a VHS player anymore. But it's like, I have to have it.
I know. I feel like I accidentally lost ours, and then I looked online and they're like $500, $600, $800. I'm like, oh my God, I guess I'm never getting one.
No,
not in the cards for Anna.
But well, let me ask you this. Well, what was his method, his idea behind wanting to do these very painful rigs and very painful things? Anastasia, you've research this. What was his methodology, and why did he want to go that far?
Well, I mean, we kind of skipped over this, but he was a choreographer, and he was a dancer, and he was a comedian. Obviously, he's got like the physicality. He wanted to really deep dive into these characters and just test the boundaries of his performance and pushing the limitations of his own body, a lot of times resulting in injuries and sometimes permanent. Like he did damage to his eye, where I think it was after like the Hunchback, when he was Quasimodo. After that, he had to wear eyeglasses. So that was like permanent damage. And then after the penalty, because a lot of, you don't know this, Brian, a little spoiler.
It's okay.
But he did a lot of jumping, and he kept on his harnesses a lot. So he was doing like these dead drops onto his knees, because he was jumping off of ladders and ropes and things like that. So it's just like this constant damage.
Wow.
And so he really messed up his legs. And so he had like severe problems with his legs afterwards. But yeah, I don't know. It's such like, knowing his history, it's such like a performer's problem and a dancer's problem. Like it's funny. Naturally, our, like, I wouldn't say careers, because I'm nowhere near him at all, but like they kind of parallel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like I grew up in the theater doing ballet since I was 3, and doing my own effects makeup and everything like that. But it's like, so the dancers, like, strife is to feel the character, if that makes sense,
right.
And it's like, with all of his talent of observing people and dissecting people and taking little nuanced movements and a flicker of an eye or something like that, into his characters, and then adjusting a nose or a cheekbone or getting rid of an eye, it's also, I don't know, vast.
Is it fair to say that the man is also a bit of a masochist?
I mean, you have to be, in a way, to be a performer at all, because you're doing the same things. You're, putting yourself out there. You're putting your soul out there on the line, during a performance. I don't know if either of you have ever acted before, but it's so scary to like put yourself out. You're basically almost, your soul's exposed, for people to critique. You know what I mean?
I just wonder if he was presented with an easier and safer and less painful way to do something, would he have actually done it? It would have been like, no, unless I'm in pain, I'm not really performing, kind of thing.
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing I think about it. I mean, I've known performers who've done stage stuff, specifically burlesque. And whenever I've talked to them about that and I've asked them why they do what they do, I mean, I've known people who've done like sideshow things where they're like, dancing on beds of nails and things like that. Every single time you ask them what got you into this and why do you keep doing it, they always go back to, well, it's a form of therapy. And that's my thought process, is like, being on stage, being on camera, performing is bearing your soul, as you said, Anastasia. It's literally, you are putting yourself completely out there, uninhibited. And, depending on what your life is like outside of that, it can be therapeutic. I've known people who have had, massive anxiety and they've gone on stage and they've done amazing things. And they're like, oh yeah, I do that because it gets my anxiety out. And you look at this man's backstory. And one thing we didn't mention is that his first wife, the reason why he was blackballed was because she tried to kill herself. I don't know the circumstances of it. I think, what was there, like an affair involved or something like that? I think the biopic kind of took some creative liberties.
Apparently, a lot of creative liberties. Yeah.
Yes, according to the family, a lot of creative liberties. Yeah. I mean, some things were true, and then some things were just spun out of control. I mean, they were having, what was it, like a Westmore do his makeup? Like, that's not. I mean, would not be the case. I mean, like, very talented on his own, obviously, but like, let's give Lon some credit here.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, he's had not necessarily tragedy, but just a lot of things happen in his life. With parents that are deaf, mutes, and things like that. I mean,
yeah, big tragedies.
You would imagine that would have to come out some way. That would have to be dealt with some way, and maybe making these characters, putting yourself through this, being on stage and screen, gets you through it. I think that's potentially a form of therapy.
I mean, he and his first wife, they were both performers, and they actually met while he was on tour. You said that vaudeville, technically he wasn't in vaudeville. He was kind of like in a performance group that was similar and going down the vaudeville trails, and touring around them. But so he met his first wife when he was on tour, and then she joined the troupe because she was this amazing singer, and then eventually they got married, and then they moved to Hollywood, and he was trying to find work, and she was singing at different cabarets and things, and she actually became the more popular one, and so there was some jealousy, I guess, between the two performers, and Lon was performing, they were both performing I guess in town on the same night, and after her performance she came, do you guys know this? She came to his theater, and then she like downed what was it? It's like an acid.
It was like acid.
Yeah,
it ruined
ruined her like singing voice, and she tried to commit suicide with that, but she lived through it. And at that point, once she got better and recovered, then he divorced her. But that was kind of like the end of the marriage after she like pulled that.
Did they ever say what was the reasoning why she went and wanted to commit suicide? Is that ever known, or was it more or less just
what I've heard was that there was just jealousies. I mean, I don't know exactly, and just because knowing like Lon's like history of wanting to be private, I've never really tried to like deep dive too much, but that's just kind of what I've read when just easy peasy
I know
searches.
The biopic that came out in like I think it was the 40s or 50s just made it seem like he was having an affair, and that was the thing that caused her. And I'm like,
I don't think so, but I couldn't say. I mean, like we weren't there, but
That's true.
But I know that was the big thing. And then he was, like what you said, he was blackballed from then on, and so he couldn't really find any work in the theater, and he never wanted. That's the big thing. So that catapulted his need to go into cinema, because he never wanted to do that, and so he started working towards that, because he liked live entertainment, which I can totally understand, the like instant gratification of doing that, and then the busyness of a theater production and doing it, because he did everything, which is so amazing. Like he would manage, and he would do like just all kinds of different things.
Every single actor that I've ever spoken with about their craft, I always just like, what do you prefer, film, television, theater? And every one of them says theater, because again, you have that audience there that you can work off, that you can feed off of. But something that, kind of needs to be mentioned again is that, film was this disgusting lower art form. Like when Lon had to go in it, like nobody wants to be in the movie business. That's just vulgar nonsense, because everybody, when anything's new, everybody treats it like it's a lower art form. So no, Lon, you're a theater man, you don't want to go into that garbage.
No thespian would ever imagine doing that.
Sully yourself with film and cinema? You mean the moving picture?
I heard those cameras steal your soul.
It's like, go ahead and have fun with your moving pictures. I'll stay in the theater. But I guess the last kind of things I want to leave you on is, what do you think is this man's legacy when it comes to cinema, and then when it comes to like specifically the horror genre? Yes, he's done other things outside of the horror genre, but he's really left a mark on the horror genre.
I'm going to go first because I think we really want to hear Anna more than me.
No.
Is there's a reason that he's called the man of 1,000 faces for a reason. Like, a lot of times people say, without so and so we wouldn't have this, and sometimes it's hyperbolic. This is not. Without Lon Chaney, we don't have makeup as we know it in film, which led to other types of makeup, and then using of makeup in digital effect. As time goes on, it had to start somewhere, and it started with Lon Chaney. But even more than just that, I mean, his ability to inhabit these type of characters that reminds, when I think of, not modern movies, but they were modern when I was little, Batman Returns. To me, Danny DeVito's Penguin in that's Lon Chaney right there. That is pulled, we don't have Oswald Cobblepot portrayed by Danny DeVito without Lon Chaney. It just doesn't exist. And I'm not talking just the makeup, but the whole performance, the whole way that he moves, and the outfit that he wears, and like the bodysuit that he wears to pull off that character. Like, every one of us owes that, a debt of gratitude to Lon Chaney for opening that floodgate.
Anastasia, what about you?
Oh my God, how do I follow that? That was so beautiful, and I completely agree. I completely agree with that statement. I mean, you're so right. I mean, I think I must have said this before, but it's like, he was such a trailblazer. He was literally creating the foundation for horror as we know it, and is still relevant to this day. We're still using those same kind of like low camera, high, actors and the shadows that he played with to help manipulate how his makeup was perceived. There's like just weird little subtle things that he did that we're all still doing. I mean, I know that I read for him, it's like he loved, being responsible for, creating these characters, but also like he wanted to be known as the greatest character actor in the world, not specifically the greatest horror actor, if that makes sense, because he was giving like a platform and showing that these like quote unquote monsters or disfigured people had their own stories, and they were worth the time to learn about like these different things that they would like these different hurdles and problems. And I always thought it was like very like impressive that he would always work in like subtle gestures for deaf people that they would recognize. So he would do subtle sign language and be able to like talk like for the movements for love or the movements of hate. Like somebody who was deaf would understand that performance, you know, which I thought was still think is very incredible that he was, you know, like so inclusive with his choices, you know, and didn't forget where he came from and his family and everything like that, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think you did.
And just to piggyback off of that, I went to New Orleans about 5 or 6 years ago, and I went to the Museum of Medicine. And on the second floor, they had a section on what we now refer to as a cleft palate. And back then, in the early 1900s, in all of their sensitivity, they called it rat face syndrome. Ugh. And they would tell, hey, sorry, man, but your baby was born with rat face. You know, it's just, you think of things now that we have the decency, assuming we're not complete jerks, you know, that we have the decency to treat everybody with, you know, respect, regardless of maybe if they have something that is out of the ordinary. You know, back then in Lon Chaney's day, not really, you know, like, oh, look at that freak, look at that monster. But for him to bring empathy to these, to, you know, to these type of characters that he was representing, you know, somebody with a hunchback or something of that nature, like that was so fresh and new to say, oh, guess what? They're human beings just like you and me.
No, exactly to your point. It's like Lon grew up with the townspeople calling his father Dummy Chaney. Like,
oh, jeez.
And he was like the head barber in town. But to be called that, like how insane now to think of like having somebody like call your father that and be known as that, you know, and just like what you were saying, like he poured empathy into these characters to kind of show that like they're humans as well. They're not these monsters, you know, they have a story. Even, you know, like obviously like Eric, he's got a wild story going on, you know, in Phantom. But yeah, people are crazy.
I mean, people are. I mean, for me, the legacy all comes down to what you guys have all alluded to. I mean, you know, prior to Chaney, the monsters that were portrayed were flat, one-dimensional, and yeah, they were scary. Like, I mean, I love Max Schreck's, Dracula or Count Orlok, depending on which version you watch. But you know, there's not much depth there. He's a scary monster. That's it. But you contrast that with Eric, as you said, Anastasia, and there's complexity there, you know, and the best monsters are the ones that we can sympathize with. And that's Lon Chaney's real legacy, is he created those monsters that he can sympathize with, and that we can look at ourselves and go like, oh, well, I kind of see the monster's point of view to some degree, right? And of course, like the studio at the time was going to be like, well, we don't want you to root for the monster. So we're going to still make him do horrible shit, and we're going to still make him scare the fuck out of you. But, you know, Chaney was able to humanize the monsters. I mean, it can't be said, like, the man brought horror to America. You know, that is really important to say. Yeah, he did a bunch of stuff, but, like, the man literally made it where horror movies were now a thing. You would not have the Universal monster movies if it was not for the Phantom of the Opera, and the Universal monster movies are kind of the first ones in America. You know, where it was no longer just we're competing. You know, we're just German expressionist films. That's horror. You know, you've got your the Nosferatus and Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. You know, he brought horror to America. Along with his makeup effects. I mean, every makeup artist from Dick Smith down owes Chaney everything because he set the groundwork. Can't negate that.
Yeah, completely. I mean, when you think of like most of his roles, like not all of them, but a lot of them, like Quasimodo and Hunchback, Eric and Phantom, and Echo and the Unholy Three. It's like they've like carried the theme of self-sacrifice, um, which are those kind of stories that he wanted to tell, and he wanted, he wanted the viewer to see that even the most evil of the characters that he was playing, they could always find like redemption, which was important, and like what you were saying, they're not one dimensional, they're nuanced.
Yeah. I mean, you look at like, Karloff's Frankenstein, and you've got similarities between, like, I can see Eric in the Phantom and look at Karloff's Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, and I can see parallels to the pathos that both of those characters are. Both monsters, but just have now a nuance of humanity to them.
Yeah, and wasn't it you're talking about like the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Wasn't it Karloff that he was hitchhiking and he gets picked up by Lon Chaney Sr. and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you haven't heard this? Okay.
No, please enlighten us.
So he's like, Karloff, if I'm okay, it's been a long day. So hopefully
we're gonna do this. We're gonna give you, this is allegedly.
let's double check this and then we can cut this if I'm wrong, but okay. I'm pretty sure that it was Karloff that was hitchhiking and Chaney picked him up, and then they get to talking, and Karloff asked Chaney, like, what is like one piece of advice that you could give like an actor? And Chaney, now I might get this quoting wrong, but basically the gist was, find something that you can do that nobody else can do and then do it the best. It's like finding that one thing that you can do. And for like Lon Chaney Sr., I mean, it was his makeup and it was his performances. And I mean, he could do so many things, so it's not really fair. Right. But it's like, it's true for like all performers. Or I mean, it can go even past performers. It can go to like just like anyone. It's like find what's your passion, what is fun for you to do, and then work towards that. Because like for me personally, I completely believe in the rule of like 10,000 hours. Like you can, if you put the work in, you can become a master of whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and I think that that's evident when you look into Chaney's past. He got his more than 10,000 hours performing for his family, on the road, performing night after night, doing like 3-4 performances a day, and then coming out to Hollywood and doing anything and everything that he could to get in front of the camera, like all kinds of different jobs, and then taking every opportunity that he could. He was a background player, then turned into like a day player, and then now he ended up being like the most popular actor ever. He was at the height of his career, when unfortunately, he passed away so soon.
Damn fake snow.
I mean, he was also a heavy smoker. So.
There is that too.
There is that.
Do not give those scumbags in the early days of Hollywood a free pass. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was beauty that killed the beast.
I'm not.
No, it was fake snow that did it. Yeah. Well, this has been great. I do want to end, though, by talking about a very special event that, Anastasia, you've got coming up, right? You want to talk about this very special event that's coming up in November, right?
I do. Yes, I do have a very special event. And hopefully when this is released, it's public, because right now it's not. But so we have in Los Angeles, we're going to have the official 99th anniversary of Phantom of the Opera, and we're going to be playing it on the big screen. We're going to have a live accompaniment by an organist, and I'm going to do a live pre-show, a brand new number that's kind of like Chaney / Phantom inspired, and kind of a Q&A after, and it's going to be amazing. And I love that nobody really celebrates these weird anniversaries. And I was like, 99th anniversary, sign me up. That's what I'm about.
And you're co-producing this event, right? Like, you're not just performing, you're really involved in the production of it.
I've been working on this event in the background, in the trenches for like 3 months, and very closely with with the blessing of the Chaney family, with Ron Chaney, and then my producing partner Mauricio of Rockin' Pins merch, which is a really great merch online store. They do a lot of licensed merch, which is very important. You want to get licensed so that it supports the artist and their family. So he has like a lot of Lon Chaney Sr. merch that goes directly to Chaney Entertainment and Ron Chaney and the whole family, I guess. But I am so beyond excited, and I am so honored to be, given this opportunity to celebrate Lon and his genius. And it's a dream come true, and I don't want to start crying because he means so much to me.
Well, when is this event, and where is it going to be at?
Okay, that's important. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I want to make sure everyone knows about this. This episode will come out before this, so I want to make sure people know when it is and where it is.
So we're going to be at the Lodge Room, which is a fun, wonderful venue who's very supportive, and the event is happening on November 26th, and it's going to be a wonderful time celebrating Lon Sr. and the Phantom of the Opera. And I'm hoping that with the success, it's going to, ricochet off for other wonderful Chaney-inspired events, because I want to do The Penalty. I want to do The Unknown. I want to do all of these films. So, yeah.
Plus, you've got like the 100th next year, so you gotta do something crazy for that one.
Yes. Well, I feel like I've got to prove myself a little bit with this one, and I hope everybody shows up.
You better all show up.
Or I'll find you.
Awesome. This has been great. Well, with it said, Anastasia, where can people find more information about you and what you're working on?
Oh, man, where can you find me? I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook under Anastasia Elfman, and then on Instagram right now I'm under Dahlia DeMont, my stage name, but once I figure out how to change it to my actual name, I will. I just don't know how to. I've got 2 accounts and I don't know how to do it, and I don't want to lose either name. So anyways, and I'm on TikTok now, I guess.
I noticed that. I saw you were on TikTok. I'm like, we're going to follow her right now. I'm like,
thank you. Cause I literally I have no idea how it works. It's so confusing. And I'm on YouTube as well. And we're working on a fun show for Bloody Bridget. So please subscribe, and that's going to be killer. Very cool.
John, where can they find you at on the internets?
The internet? Huh. No, I just use a phonograph, and what's that thing where like the Titanic, like do 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 do. I can't remember. Anyways, but no,
Morse code.
Morse code.
Morse code.
Yeah, I just use Morse code to communicate, and pigeons.
No. Smoke signals. No.
That and a can on a string.
Hey, I'm working on my 10,000 hours on smoke signals. I'm still working on it. But you can find me over at Facebook, Instagram, and head on over to YouTube and check out J-Dub's Video Nasties. If you see me as a grown man in what I call my 1980s middle school photo, you found the right place. Like and subscribe over there. Again, I'm not 100% sure when this one's dropped, so I don't want to promote anything because I don't know when this one's coming out. But just go over to the channel and subscribe and enjoy.
There you go. Of course, if you have loved this episode, do me a favor and share this episode. Seriously, if you've got friends, if you've got family, if they are secretly Lon Chaney fans but they don't want to admit it, go share this episode with them, because they will not be secret anymore. And on top of that, you're like, there are no secret Lon Chaney fans. They
No,
are
we're
out
very-
in the open.
We are out and proud. Like, you literally can't get us to shut up. Like, how long was this episode supposed to be? And look at how long it is now. Like, I
It's
won't shut up.
perfect.
And to be honest, we only got through like half of my notes. Like, not even.
No, we're gonna have to come back for part 2 then.
Yeah,
I
we'll
so over prepare for these things because, like, I love talking about it.
we'll do part 2, but we'll also talk about his kid. I heard he was in the motion picture business.
There you
too.
go.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, outside of sharing, do me a favor. Go to cinemapsychoshow.com/follow, and you can follow us on all your favorite podcast platforms. We got them all there. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, they're all there. Just press a button, and boom, you're following us. And if you're watching us here on YouTube, hey, good job. Thanks. Do me a favor. Right there at the bottom, you're going to see something pop up that's going to ask you to like and subscribe and hit the bell and do all that fun stuff. Please do that. It helps us out. YouTube doesn't know our podcast exists unless you do those things. So it kind of helps us out a big time if you just hit the subscribe button, hit the follow, hit the bell. That really helps us out. And with that said, we will see you next time.
Cheers.